Welcome to the Calm Cockpit. In today's episode, we're diving into a primary sense aviators use for safety and flight operations, your hearing. We'll cover all things regarding your hearing health and also dive into music, especially surprising ways you can use this low-cost, low-time intensive intervention to use your hearing more effectively and help your mind be more organized.
We'll give you simple and actionable steps you can follow to design your own music and hearing protocols to relieve stress, improve concentration, have a bit of fun, and keep your holistic flying life in tune.
The Calm Cockpit starts now.
Onyx 1-2 Mike Oscar, runway 27, clear for takeoff.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I'm Geeta Brown, midlife student pilot and licensed yoga and meditation educator and musician with over 30 years of experience teaching high performers how to improve their lives without adding stress.
And I'm John Niehaus, corporate pilot and professional flight instructor.
And as usual, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'm so excited for today's episode. It's going to be my new favorite one because they're all my favorites. I'm like that mom who's like, you're all my favorite children. But this one is really near and dear to my heart because we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is music and also your hearing. So this is really my area of expertise, which I'll get into a moment, but it's going to kind of be like a loose presentation and answer session. I guess, John, you're sort of playing the role of like my student light today. How about we'll call it that? I'll present, you can kind of ask some questions, and you'll get John reacting in real time to this information because he has no idea really what I'm going to say today. How does that sound, John? Are you game?
Boy, do I have questions.
Please make them easy. Don't stump the music teacher. So first, we're going to go through general facts about how your hearing develops. And then we're going to get into how music and your hearing has developed on a species level and what the role that music and hearing plays in our social structure, our biological processes, our cognition, etc. And that we're really going to use sort of as an underpinning because once you have that information, the 6 specific protocols that I'm going to go into for sort of improving your flying life, you'll be able to adjust and adapt because you know why I'm suggesting what I'm suggesting. And so we're going to talk about things like how to downshift from that busy work day when your mind is racing and you're going into family life, how you can use music for that. If you're wanting to improve your concentration, I've got a protocol for that. We're going to talk about a protocol for energizing your workouts so you can work out more effectively and use the power of music to really enhance your biological response to your working out. I've got a protocol if you are someone who has racing thoughts. I think most modern humans have racing thoughts at some point. I've got a protocol for helping that balance of work and life, which we know you don't have to be balanced, but just moving towards balance with that. And if I didn't say it, I've also got one in their protocol for optimizing your downtime. So if you have a short bit of downtime, like crew rest, you've got an hour, how you can use music and hearing and sound and silence to really optimize that time so you're really getting refreshed in the shortest amount of time possible. Sound like a plan?
So the answer to all of these questions is death metal, right?
Well, it might be. The louder, the better. Let's just destroy your hearing even more. So
Perfect.
It does have its place. It does have its place. I'm a huge Metallica fan. And short plug, if you've never seen it, the 2 concerts that Metallica did with the San Francisco Symphony are phenomenal. They are mic drop worthy. So my background, just so you know, like why Geeta is going to be talking about all this stuff, I am a classical musician. I've been a classical musician since 4th grade or so, and I'm 50 now. So that's more than 30 plus, going on 40 years probably. Oh boy, even more than that. Many, many years. And I think, musicians and pilots, we share a lot in common. We're disciplined. We understand that you have to do short bits of work every day over a long period of time to be good. We have to have good hand-eye coordination. We have to play well with other people, quite literally. We have to be organized, disciplined, delaying our gratification. And also, you have to be really good at that extrapolative thinking, taking in lots of complex information, but being able to focus on the job at hand and sorting through what's important and what's not important. So I know a lot of pilots are musicians, but this is really going beyond music today because a lot of my background as well is in music therapy. So I was a music performer for many, many years, music educator, and I found myself, though, in concerts watching how the audience was responding to the music. And at some point I heard about music therapy and I'm like, what is that? And how come I haven't heard of it? I'm already, I was like a professor at that point. And it turns out that there's this whole behavioral science that is really, especially with the advent of brain imaging, really looking at how not only music gets processed on a neurological level, but how it functions in our daily life. So for many years, I worked as a board certified music therapist. So I worked in some intensive inpatient psychiatric wards, helping people to feel calm in that very intensive situation and also help them develop the social skill of communicating when perhaps their grasp on our concept of reality was feeling a little bit challenged. I worked a lot with children with special needs, helping them with social skills and also physical development, using music to augment their neurological process to make their physical rehabilitation more effective. I also worked with cancer patients undergoing very specific radiotherapy for cancers of the throat. And we did some targeted projects looking at music-assisted progressive muscle relaxation and pairing that with preferred music and literally measuring through their immune response the effect of that music-assisted progressive muscle relaxation on their immune response and their recovery time from radiation therapy. So I've done like a lot of, there's more and more. I've done elder care, work with dementia patients, helping them to retain memories when presented with dementia through stroke or Alzheimer's, and a lot of communication work as well. So I am no longer a board certified music therapist. I am still a music therapist, but I let my board certification drop because, as you can imagine, working in those populations, you got to keep your boards up. But I really moved into the education field after about 10 years as a music therapist. But all that info is still in my brain. So that's why I get really nerdy when it comes to all of this stuff. So questions or comments from the peanut gallery before I launch into some general factoids about hearing?
So those are all amazing things. And, if I'm here as a pilot thinking like, how is this going to make me better?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about being able to relax. We're talking about being able to go to sleep. We're talking about studying.
Mm-hmm.
So bear with us because, there's going to be some cool science stuff. But you know me, I need a good hack. And so I want to find out which song I'm going to listen to so that I can, remember all of the various limitations and numbers.
Oh, if only it were that easy. However, what I can tell you is like the very same processes that are involved in working with someone who has Parkinson's, and we're using music paired with their gait training to help them maintain their physical functioning to be able to walk, is the same exact thing we can use as pilots to help us downshift from an intensive work schedule, and we're going back into the rest area on board. It's the same neurobiological processes to get your brain and your neurobiology to downshift to a relaxation state to optimize that downtime than it is for the Parkinson's patient who's using it to in a more rehabilitative way. We're all subject to our biology, and that's the good news, is music affects us pretty much all predictably and in the same ways. So John, there's no shortcut. If you know the science, then you'll be able to choose for yourself the magical song that's going to make you remember all the things somehow.
All the things. All right.
All the things. Okay. So general facts about how hearing develops and works. Please do not skip this. If you're tempted to scrub forward, do not, because it's actually, not only is it super, super fascinating, but these are the things we really need to know and understand so we can protect our hearing as pilots. And you'll see how vulnerable our hearing is to the noisy environment in which we work. So Hearing. You are in utero. You are a collection of cells. It is one of the first senses to develop along with touch. And it's one of the last senses to die. So there's ample evidence. I won't go into it, but I'll link it in the show notes if you really want to read it. But ample evidence that in utero, babies can distinguish their mom's voice versus other people's voices. They've actually done really cool studies where they designed to test that the baby can identify and learn their mother's voice versus other voices in utero. So this is showing us that before we're even launched into the world, hearing is a primal sense that's been developed to keep us safe. It is wired into us, and we can't ignore the input of our hearing, that the way that has on our neurobiology and then our physical response. So I think that's really fascinating. And there's also a lot of evidence too that even when people are close to death, that their hearing is still intact. So even if they cannot respond to you, they are still hearing. Again, showing that through our biology and however we have evolved here on this planet, that it is baked into us that we need this to keep ourselves safe and connected to the outside world. So that means you can't get away from the effect that the noisy world is having on your body and mind.
This is perfect because when my son, before he was born, I had gotten one of those microphone things that you stick on your wife's belly. And of course I was like, you like pizza and airplanes and Star Wars.
Yes.
And you know what? It worked because he does love all of those things. So this is great. It only validates the crazy things that I do.
You have programmed him effectively to the vital things of life.
Yes.
So how does sound actually then get into the brain? This is fascinating. And I'm going to take, what I did years of study in this. I'm going to try to give it in like 7 sentences or so. Generally think about it. We've got these air molecules. And when something is set vibrating, like my vocal folds right now are vibrating, they bump into those air molecules, and those air molecules then bump into other air molecules. It's kind of like if you set up on a tennis court a whole bunch of tennis balls and you just put them all over the tennis court, and you took like a larger ball, like a volleyball, and you roll that volleyball into the tennis balls, you'd see all the tennis balls bumping into one another, and that the waves of those tennis balls, one would bump into another, into another, into another, and that movement would propagate across the tennis balls. The same thing is happening in the air all the time with sound. So those air molecules bump into one another. Then those air molecules go, and they're funnel. That's why your ears are shaped the way they are, literally like a funnel. They funnel those propagation of air molecules bumping into one another into the ear, which then vibrates your eardrum, which in turn vibrates the tiniest bones in your body. They're so small. And those, I think it's 3 of them, those tiny bones in turn vibrate the cochlea, which is that fluid-filled spiral in the inner ear, which is also responsible, pilots, for our vestibular system, our sense of balance, and our sense of knowing where we are in space. So hearing, balance, equilibrium, vertigo issues are all interrelated. Here's where it gets absolutely fascinating to me. I literally get chills, because how do we turn air molecules bumping into one another into an electrochemical signal? Basically, you have all these little hairs in this fluid-filled sac, the stereocilia, cool name, whatever. They're little hairs moving in water, fluid rather. When all this vibrates, they open ion channels. And the opening of these ion channels is a signal that gets monitored by sensory neurons surrounding the hair cells. And when they get to like a certain threshold level, these neurons fire, and that turns into electrical signals to the auditory cortex of the brain. So basically, it's like this specific series of proteins that fire in sequence in response to the physical movement of the air molecules vibrating through your ear, which to me is freaking wild. That means that every sound that you are hearing, you're not necessarily hearing the sound, you're interpreting the electrical signal in your auditory cortex. So A lot of this goes to, I'm saying this because our perception of reality, our perception of danger, it is wired into how we interpret the external world. And as pilots, I think it's really interesting to know that these basic things, they go back something like 120 million years. Like they found fossilized remains of dinosaurs that died. And we basically have the same inner ear that they did. So from a biological imperative, if you're hearing that terrain, pull up alert in the cockpit, biologically you're programmed to alert to that stimulus with a cascade of responses I'll detail in a minute that your cerebral cortex can't ever outrun or really dampen down. These processes are like reflexes that happen. And it's really important to know so that you can make skillful choices about how you're using and filtering the noise around you. Let me give one more little tip here, and then I want to ask John some questions here. So if we talk about these, though, your hearing is largely going to be determined by these stereocilia in the cochlea moving in response to the propagation of sound waves. What happens as we age, or if you're exposed to a lot of noise, heavy machinery, guess what? Jet planes, other types of heavy machinery, those cilia, those hairs actually break down. They can get damaged, they break, and that's what leads to hearing loss if you've been exposed to a lot of noisy environments. I don't know if you've ever been to a concert and then you leave there and then you hear that or you've lost some of your hearing. Have you ever been to a loud concert like that?
Oh, yeah. I think I still have some damage from the very first concert that I went to. I went back to work the next day and my boss kept talking to me and you can't hear me at all, can you?
Oh my gosh.
And I'm kind of panicking a little bit. And I have just a tiny bit of tinnitus still from probably that event, but also, as a high school student, you listen to earbuds too loud and
Yep.
slowly damage your hearing. I've probably damaged it more because of music than I ever did because of jet noise or APU sounds. So.
Yeah. It's so easy to have happen. In fact, I've noticed on commercial flights when I'm a passenger that if I use kind of crappy earbuds, I have to turn them up so loud to hear them over the engine noise. And then when we land, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I listened to it at that level on the ground, I'd be yanking them out of my ears. But I just was habituated like that. What is it? The frog in the boiling water? Just keep turning it up so you can hear it. I'm like, I am literally damaging my ears and not even knowing it. So I think it's really important, especially if you're younger, if you're in high school, college, really start protecting your hearing because those cells, those hairs that you damage now, they actually do not grow back. Once they're broken, they're gone. Now we can do a lot on the neurological end, which we'll talk about today to stimulate the auditory cortex and make it really robust. But once you lose that physical mechanism that's going to turn that physical sound into electrical impulse, it's gone. Or as John said, it can then produce this erroneous signal, tinnitus, tinnitus, whatever you want to call it, tomato, tomato, which is where you hear a sound that's not there. It can be whizzing, buzzing, clanking. It can be so distracting and actually deeply distressing to hear noise that's not there. So protect your hearing, please.
It's interesting. I actually just had this conversation with one of my fellow pilots on the last flight that I had, where all of our pilots use kind of these tiny, just over the ear, kind of right on your ear headsets. And myself and another coworker came in with our big Bose, A20s.
Yep.
And not a plug for Bose. It's just happened to be what I have. And they like, especially on long flights, because their headsets kind of hurt their heads after a period of time, they like to take them off and then just go without a headset and use the speakers and the hand mic. And I always resist because having that ear protection and having that noise canceling in there, it allows for you to, and again, I think we're going to get into this later, but it allows for you to not feel as drained, and it doesn't give you the fatigue that the constant noise gives you. So it's all kind of coming full circle for me because again, it's just that constant exposure, even if it's to small noises that will, eventually either cause damage or in the short term, just give you that sort of head head pain or fatigue or whatever that might look like.
Absolutely. And I love that we're taking this little segue because that's, like I'm a teacher and this is where you make the discoveries. So we're just going to keep pausing here for a moment. I have a similar headset. Whoa, that's a game changer. And what I did once, though, and I recommend that everyone does this who flies general aviation, is one day we were having a little problem with things. And my instructor looked at me. He said, you know what? We're going to fly in the pattern today with no headsets at all, because I want you to know what it feels like to fly a general aviation plane with no headsets. So it's noisy, man. It is noisy. I fly Piper Warrior. She's a noisy girl. And you're trying to hear the comms through that little speaker in the ceiling and the hand mic. Holy cow. I think we did 3 to 5 laps, nothing crazy. By the end of it, I was so tired from the auditory fatigue. Now, at that point, flying a couple of laps in the pattern was like no big deal on a fatigue scale, but you enter in that noise factor. It was so beneficial because imagine now if you haven't done that and you have an emergency situation where it's either lost comms or whatever has happened and you lose your fancy A20 or whatever you use, your noise canceling, and you haven't ever exposed yourself to that intense workload of having that sound, overwhelm your senses. Do not underestimate that could have a predictive factor in your ability to maintain composure in an emergency situation. So train for that ahead of time. And now that you know, because you listen to our podcast, how wired it is into your brain to interpret sounds from the outside world as either safety or danger, and how we're going to get into thalamic reflex in a moment, but how it produces this immediate response in the brain. Really take that seriously. And you can add it in, though, as part of your training.
There's a lot of studies involved with how the RPM changing of the reciprocating engine can be additionally fatiguing, at least in a lot of cases with what I do. It's kind of one steady noise through the whole process, at least until kind of takeoff and landing. But with a reciprocating engine, you're kind of constantly adjusting, and you've got your actual propeller controls trying to make those match. And God forbid they're out of sync, and that's even worse. For anybody who's flown multi-engines regularly, that is a huge pet peeve of a lot of people because it drives you crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so having a good headset to kind of cancel some of that stuff out is a huge advantage for people. And flying with one and flying without one, you definitely see the difference.
Yeah, take advantage of the tech, because when I was coming up as a musician, we didn't know any of this stuff. They would sit us poor clarinet players, I did a lot of orchestral work, right in front of the trumpets. So I have years of trumpets blasting, and particularly in my left ear, I know I don't hear quite as well as in my right. They do the hearing test. They're like, they're both the same. I'm like, no, they're not. Now for orchestral musicians, they actually put up like a big barrier behind your head. They actually put up a whole thing because they've realized that they were damaging people's hearing for years. So if you're younger, earlier on in the process, protect it now. Again, once those stereocilia break, they're gone. So protect them forever. So let's pivot now. We've talked sort of generally how you functionally hear. Let's just talk about generally like how music specifically has developed as a species. Just want to talk a little bit about like the social structure, biological processes, cognition, because this will really help us dial in a little bit with our protocols of understanding, this is how that works. This is what I need in the moment. So you don't have to, again, at the end of this, follow my protocol, but you'll have the knowledge for yourself about how it's actually working in your brain and how you can then make choices for yourself. So let's see. One of the coolest things I think about music is that when they put people in a functional MRI, whether they're actively making music or even passively listening to music, they see all of the areas of the brain light up. Versus if you put someone in a functional MRI and you have them do math, they'll see specific areas of the brain light up, 2 or 3. With music, the whole brain lights up. So we mean sensory motor processing, the cognitive area of your brain, which is the one we tend to focus on a lot, your memory centers, your emotional centers, everything. They call it, it's fires together and it kind of wires together, which is, I think, why people really enjoy it, because it is inherently a holistic activity that brings all of that diversity of the brain together into one activity. And that's why it can also feel very profoundly relaxing, even listening to death metal. Of course it does, because you now know it's lighting up all those areas of your brain, and functionally your body's going to like that sort of bringing of homeostasis of everything coming on together. So music itself, I actually want to talk a little bit about, you were talking about the droning of the engines. So there's this really cool thing that they call in music therapy, either the thalamic reflex, or sometimes they call it the thalamic response. And you could think of the thalamus as just this little area of your brain. It's like a relay station. So anything that comes in here, we're talking about hearing, anything that comes in those sensory wise goes into the thalamus, and it kind of decides where in the brain it's going to send that information. And after it goes to the thalamus, then it goes to the cerebral cortex. So music in particular seems to go to the thalamus. And before it even goes to the thinking part of your brain, where you're like, I'm listening to death metal, this is awesome. Before you even do that, it produces an immediate physical response. This is why working with folks who have Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's or any other, I've worked with kids with traumatic brain injuries, we can use music to produce an immediate physical response without you needing to think or reason your way through why that response is happening. I've worked with folks who are at end stage of their life. They're essentially functionally in a coma, and using sedative music, which we're going to talk about in our downshifting from work into rest protocol in a bit. When using sedative music over a period of 5 to 10 minutes, we see immeasurable decrease in blood pressure, heart rate, and a noticeable relaxation of the muscular system of the body. And this is with someone who would be considered clinically, quote unquote, I hate this term, but brain dead, in a coma, not able to respond to the outside world. So again, music is wired into our bodies to go into the thalamus and produce that immediate physical response. You don't have to think about it. So think about why this would be this way. If you're listening to the drone of those engines, it's telling you, if especially if they're like, is it like a sound that's like out of tune? Is that what it sounds like?
It's kind of like a wow.
Okay.
Whereas if you actually have them set correctly, you can kind of get just one solid drone.
Okay.
But just a small hair off makes it so that it's different on each side.
That makes total sense, though, if you're thinking about then every sound that comes in is going to the thalamus first and producing that physical response of, I have to fix this. I have to do something. I need to fix this. It's going to be very hard. You're going to be constantly as a pilot trying to override that thalamic response and tamp it down like, no, everything's actually okay. The engines are fine. You're constantly literally fighting your biology in that situation. So you also think about this just sensory wise generally. Let's pan out for a minute. Evolutionary as a function, this thalamic response is going to give us cues about our environment. Think about something like you go to the beach and it's like really those calm ocean waves that kind of lull you after a while into just feeling more calm. Without thinking about why that's happening, that thalamic response is creating this principle of entrainment, where your body is matching what it's hearing on the outside. So if you're hearing something that's regular, a whoosh in and then out, and then in and then out, and it's about 60 beats per minute, which is about click, click, click. Without you needing to think about it, your heart rate, your breathing start to match those ocean waves. And what it's telling your brain at that primal level is that there is no storm. It is okay for your parasympathetic nervous system to relax. You do not need to be on alert. Same thing like with gentle rain. It's signaling through that thalamic response, adequate water. There's no scarcity here. You can rest tonight. This is all happening pre-cognition, pre-cerebral cortex, getting in there and chattering away. Think of something like birdsong. Birds sing when there's no predators around. If you bring an eagle into the environment, the birds will shut up quickly because they know that they might get eaten if they announce their presence. So when we hear birdsong, again, thalamic response, before we even can think about it, our biology knows birdsong equals no predator, equals it's okay to sleep, okay to relax. So translate that to a pilot, you put them in a cockpit with a reciprocating engine. Did I say that right? That's out of tune with itself. And the whole time you're trying to sort of fight that response of, is this okay? Do I need to be concerned? Do I need to make an adjustment? And you're constantly trying to sort of work with that. Imagine how fatiguing that is then for your cerebral cortex to kind of be at odds with your biology. That's a lot.
Well, and it's almost even you have to add the little bit of that perfectionism into it as well. When you're the pilot and you're sitting next to somebody and you're like, oh, it's out of tune. They're going to notice. It's
so totally.
Perfect. I need to make it right. Make it right. So yeah, there's that whole other angle to it.
Yeah, you could like over focus on like making it perfect when actually it's actually okay where it is. So yeah. Just a couple other little music therapy concepts, and then I want to turn into some protocols here. So we talked about the entrainment and the thalamic reflex, how important that is. Let's talk a little bit about the way rhythm can organize and energize behavior. Oh, that sounds so fancy. This comes back to the work of Gaston, who we kind of consider like the father of music therapy. He was one of the first to really look at it from like a biopsychosocial model and actually really start drilling down into what's happening when we listen to music. And this we can really use when we talk about concentration and exercise modes in a minute. But rhythm in particular organizes and energizes our behavior. What does that mean? You can think of something really, really simple, like you go to a ball game and they start to play, "Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?" And everyone knows, oh my goodness, things are happening. Most people stand up at that point. You think of things like if you're, I don't know, you're having some cocktails and then a band starts playing and your toe is tapping and you're sipping your whatever you sip. I don't know. I don't drink cocktails, so I don't know. But you look down and like your toe is tapping and your head is nodding. And then before you know it, someone's like, oh, hey, let's dance. And somehow everyone kind of knows how to dance, even the worst dancer in the world. That is
my wife would disagree with you.
But that music kind of organizes our behavior through those social cues and those social rituals. And rhythm in particular really gives us a great deal of organization. So we have things like, people standing up with the national anthem. We have things like
Barry White.
Barry White, yes. What do you think of? You know instantly what to do with that music. The one for me growing up was the Thriller video. Everyone knew how to do the Thriller video, right? Like that choreography was something you could learn. It was complex, but it follows a regular pattern. So we can really use this ability. It goes back to the thalamic reflex. If the music is really upbeat, your body and your biology will start to entrain or match that beat. If the music is a lot slower, your neurobiology will match that slower beat. Then the last little point is we can use this to kind of then really, how I like to use it is to downshift. When we're flying a plane, our brains are super active, right? We are doing all the things. When we're shifting, though, to a resting state, again, I'm thinking of that crew rest, we want the parasympathetic nervous system to take over. And the parasympathetic nervous system is that aspect that helps us with resting, digesting our food. That's really switches on. And if we know that that rest is going to be short, we can use music through the thalamic reflex or thalamic response to sort of down-regulate our nervous system, slow the rhythm down, slow the pace of the music down, keep the general volume lower. And inherently through all the processes I've just gone through, we get cues to our brain and our biology that it is okay to slow down. The heart rate will slow down. The breath rate will slow down. In turn, our thoughts, we may experience a slowing down of the thoughts. And then we perceive that as, oh, I feel more quote unquote relaxed. But it's actually using the music to help you shift there through all of these automatic processes that have been wired in since you were a baby in utero, learning that it's okay to respond to a soothing mother's voice. Make
So
sense?
that's interesting because, I think a lot of people who listen to music when they go to sleep, I think they just assume, and probably myself included up to this point, you just assume that what you're doing is drowning out the world around you. And I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
that plays a part in it, but
Yeah.
really that's the smaller part. Yes, you are drowning things out, but your body's reacting to the music in a much deeper way than just trying to avoid what happens to be going on all around you.
Absolutely. The technical term we music therapists use for that is masking. You can use music to mask environmental sound. And usually, if you find something that's either just a slight pitch higher than what you're trying to mask, it will mask it without needing to turn the volume up higher. So you can protect your hearing. Higher pitches vibrate at a higher frequency, so they'll mask those lower pitches. So you pick something that's just a little bit higher up here, and it may mask a sound without needing to just do it with volume blasting alone. It takes a little experimentation. You have to listen to your environment, but masking is a really key thing. We did it in the hospital all the time. That's a noisy place, hard to sleep, especially for the kiddos. So we would use a lot of purposefully selected music just to mask the noise of the hospital without just needing to use a volume blast, which it only does so much. So this is, I think, great time. Let's shift to like a first protocol, which is that downshifting from work to rest and using then music to help optimize rest. It's perfect segue, almost like we planned it and we totally did not. So let me talk about what sedative music is, and let's get to our first protocol with that. So sedative music. So John's there. He's like, it's noisy. Let's say you're on board. You're in your lovely fart locker, which is where you go to rest on board. You're sealed up in. You're like, okay, what do you usually get? Like an hour, a little more?
Anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half, usually.
Cool. So you want to do like some social media time or like whatever you want to do, some just kind of la 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 la. And then you're like, all right, let me listen to some music and do some breathing, kind of just at least, if I don't sleep, at least kind of downshift into rest. You would want to pick a sedative piece. What does that mean? We have either stimulative music or sedative music in music therapy land. Sedative music is stuff that I said earlier. General tempo is 60 beats per minute or less. And 60 beats is the beat that second hand ticks around a clock. Who has a freaking real clock anymore, though? Like, I actually have an app that has a second hand ticking around so I can see it. But it's about, if the beat was this, it'd be bum, 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 dum, 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 dun, 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 da. That anything, dee, dum, dun, dee, dun, 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 dum, about this tempo or slower. That you really need that for that thalamic reflex to be significantly different, to help you to slow down without thinking you have to slow down. So sedative music, it's beating at about 60 beats per minute. It has instruments kind of all of the same family. So you'd want to stick with your guitar realm, piano, synthesizer, what we used to call new age back in the 80s. But all instruments kind of the same family. And here's the key thing, no sudden movements, right? No big swells and crescendos and getting really loud and then getting really soft. So not a lot of big changes, just all staying in that. If you find pieces like that, I will link some. There's several albums I can recommend. I'll put them all in the show notes that stay in that realm. And you stay there for 5 or 10 minutes, it really does help. And again, you don't have to think that it's going to help. It just will.
Who can say where the road goes?
Oh, you have a beautiful singing voice. I forgot one thing, which you just reminded me of, that it should be something you prefer to listen to. Because if you hate it, it will override that thalamic reflex. Like it will every freaking time. So preferred music. And I actually have found, after doing this with many students over many, many years, that it's so important to find what you prefer. As a yoga teacher, I rarely use music in my group classes because 95% of the class will love the piece I choose for deep relaxation. The 5% that hate it will become so agitated, they will actually get angry. And sometimes they'll even get up and leave. Now, I've never actually like left my class, but I've heard other yoga teachers say that. But they will come up to you at the end and say, like, please don't play that again, because it reminds people of something. This little side note, music gets encoded because music stimulates all the areas of the brain. It gets encoded in all the areas of the brain. This is why when people suffering from dementia can still recall songs from their 20s and their 30s, even if they may be nonverbal, you can start singing songs that they listened to when they were a young adult, and they will suddenly start singing. So it's really, really powerful. So pick something that you like, that you feel safe with, that has positive associations. Or I like to pick stuff that's brand new to me, that has like no previous association. So I'm always pairing the song I use for helping me downshift to something brand new. So if I were a pilot, let's get to the protocol, and I'm trying to downshift from work to rest. This is something I struggle with. This is like why I'm bringing it up. Once I get into work mode, it is like impossible for me to just like, and now we're moving into leisure time. My husband will be like, are you coming into dinner? And I'm like, just one more thing. I think pilots can relate to that. Like, we like to get shit done. So how I have found to help me is I'm using my thalamic reflex and putting all this together now, people. So listen on up, students, get your notes out. I'm using the thalamic reflex. I'm using a sedative piece of music. I'm choosing something that is brand new to me, that I've chosen just for this reason. And I do what's called a timed shift. This is literally what I call the protocol for myself. I'm like, I need a timed shift. So I have a piece that is written by a composer named Deuter, Deuter. I will link to his music below. It is 9 minutes and 58 seconds long. And somehow my brain is like, I can do 9 minutes and 58 seconds of listening to this piece. I go upstairs into a different room. I put this music on, not in earbuds. I actually put it into the room around me so that it's more, it's not just getting into my auditory cortex through my ears, but it's actually in the space around me, creating the environment, quite literally in the molecules in the air. And I say for 9 minutes and 58 seconds, I'm going to do my breathing practice that Sarah taught us. It's in a bonus episode. And I'm just going to lay on the floor, do my breathing practice, and listen to this 9 minute, 58 second piece. I know the piece so well now. I know what's like the halfway point, what's the end point. It helps me so much because it is not very long. And I know it works because it uses all the principles that I've taught you about before. It even has environmental sounds of like pleasant birds and things in it. So it's signaling to my nervous system that it's time to shift. There has not been one single time that I have used this time shift with a sedative piece of music that has not helped me to just stop the busy working mind and downshift from working into kind of resting, leisure, relaxation time. It's so short, takes less than 10 minutes. It works. And I'm a much happier wife than when I come down to hang out with hubby than if I came in with that like busy, I was just studying for the FAA written, and I'm like, I'm like a much happier, more connected person. And if you think about it as well, from a protective aspect, it's helped me to light up all those areas of my brain, which there is some research that shows it helps you to integrate your memories of what you learned throughout the day. So it's also kind of bringing everything together. And all I have to do is lay there, breathe, and listen to a nice, chill piece of music. So it sounds woo-woo, but there's a lot of reasons of why biologically it works. What do you think of protocol timed shift to downshift?
I think it's interesting. I can correlate it to the idea of having that quiet drive home between work and coming home. And it's funny because I've had at least a half hour drive to work since essentially I graduated from college.
Huh.
And so it's been anywhere from half an hour to an hour, and sort of seeing there's a sweet spot where maybe an hour is a little bit too long or right on the edge. A half hour for me, half hour, 35 minutes feels pretty right. My brother-in-law, he's a doctor, and he used to work about, maybe 45 minutes to an hour from where he lives. And he now works at the hospital in town where he does live. And he can basically like walk or ride a bike or have a very short drive. And I was talking to him one day, And this kind of goes to your point where I said, oh, it must be really nice to work in town, and, you're so close. And he goes, yeah, it is nice, but I almost step out of work and go straight into being home. And of course, then there's things to do at home, and there's 2 kids, and there's a dog, and all of these things. He's like, I literally don't have time to leave the stuff at work before I walk in the door to my home. So it's kind of that correlation of, even if it's just 10 minutes, there's a huge change in your brain, in your attitude, in the way you feel, by even just giving yourself 10 minutes to go, oh, okay, let's tackle the next thing.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise you've got what's behind you and what's in front of you kind of colliding. Yes. And, anybody who's had melted Neapolitan ice cream, it just, it's too much all at once.
So not good. You brought up such an important point, and I actually have that. See, Synergy Man, under my downshifting from work to rest, is this idea of the time shift that I was talking about, but also using part of driving and considering the role of silence when you're driving. Most of us drive to and from. It could also be public transport. So zooming out for just one moment, one definition of music by the famous avant-garde composer John Cage is that, quote, music is the combination of sound and silence. And when we're talking about hearing, sometimes we just think about putting more in, more and more music, more and more sound. If you're like me, another podcast that I'm going to listen to on the way home. And even while we're cleaning now, listening to podcasts, when we're driving, we're listening to them. I'm podcast junkie here. Can you tell? Or we're listening to an audiobook. We've always got an audiobook going. And pilots, right? We're constantly seeking that information input. However, consider the protective role that quiet has. Even while you're driving, there still is a lot of sound input of the world around you. But to Cage's contention, he wrote a piece that's called 4 minutes, 33 seconds. And what it is, basically imagine you're at a concert hall and you're in the audience and there's a piano up on stage and this person's going to come perform 4 minutes, 33 seconds. They walk out, they sit at the piano, and for 4 minutes and 33 seconds, they sit there. They do not play a single note. At the end of 4 minutes and 33 seconds, the concert pianist stands up, bows, and then leaves the stage. And the audience applauds. Cage's contention was that all of the sounds around us at all the times is a musical landscape itself. And I think it's not only an interesting concept, but it's interesting to think about now that we've talked about how sound and hearing works in our lives, how all the sounds around you all day long contribute to that feeling you were just saying of what you were just doing and what you're about to do mash up together, and it's no good for our brain. So along with downshifting from work to rest using this time shift that I recommended with a piece of music, you can also do it using silence. I have a habit now of when I get home, I pull into the garage, I shut off the car, let the record reflect, and I just sit there in the garage for 2 to 3 minutes just in quiet. And I just kind of just sit there for a sec. Because as soon as I get out of the car, the chickens in the barn hear me and they start squawking that they want their treats. And as soon as I walk through the door, the dogs are all over me and the hubby's there and the things are happening. I found that 2 to 3 minutes of just silent sitting is so beneficial. You can also do that while driving. I encourage you just for 5 or 10 minutes before you get where you're going, just turn off all of the music, turn off all the podcasts, all the audiobooks. Just be with the sounds around you. It will be very calming to your nervous system. So that's protocol number 1. So let's talk about a big one, which is improving concentration and focus. I want to give 2 sort of separate ideas here. One is a way to improve concentration and focus that is a standalone, it's actually a practice that you would do multiple times per week, separate from everything else you do. Another way we're going to talk about in a moment, improving concentration and focus when you're actually doing the things. So many, many years ago when I was at Aspen Music Festival in school for the summer, there was a famous violin instructor there. I mean, she's just like beyond legit. This woman is legend. And a young lady was up there, I forget, playing some violin concerto. I forget what. And she said, "Young lady, when you go home tonight, I want you to sit down and listen to Itzhak Perlman's recording of this concerto. And I want you to take the score, which is the whole orchestra thing all written out, and I want you to pick out the second cello's line on that score. And the entire way through your listening of the concerto, I want you to listen to and follow without ever losing focus the second cello line for the whole concerto, which is like 25 minutes long." The young lady was like, "I don't think I'm going to be able to do that." She's like, "I know, but that's the kind of concentration you need to have to play the concerto as a soloist. You need to have that focus where you're never going to be distracted." Now, that's a high, lofty goal. I don't think I could do that. I've trained as a musician pretty much my whole life. But we can borrow that. I've always remembered that. And I've tried this as a standalone practice, and it really has worked to improve my focus. Because we know that music is going to activate your motor cortex, your sensory cortex, auditory processing cortex, encoding all of your memories. When you're listening to a piece of music, you can take something that you like that's maybe 5 minutes long or so. I would recommend, if you can, play it through a good speaker rather than earbuds. Again, we want to get as many air molecules around you vibrating with that sound. It's going to be a much richer experience for your brain, but earbuds will work. Take that 5-minute piece of music and say, "I'm going to focus on," you could choose one part of that piece of music, or you could just say the piece of music in general. And for 5 minutes, I'm going to only concentrate on what I'm hearing. If my mind starts to wander, thinking about what's coming up later, this is stupid, you notice thoughts, judgments, you just bring it back to, I'm listening to the guitar. If it goes on to this or that, oh, I'm hearing the bass, oh, I'm going back to the guitar. It's like lasering and locking in your hearing to isolate everything else and focus in on one thing. If you do this 3 to 4 times a week for 5 minutes over several months, see what happens. It's a way of teaching your brain to sift through a lot of complex auditory information and picking out the detail that you want to focus on, which I kind of think for pilots wouldn't be a transferable skill. What do you think about that one? Does it sound too wackadoo?
I mean, it's funny. I used to fly with a pilot, good friend of mine, and he owned his own airplane. And, you know, of course, this was when there was more than one pilot on board, so bear with me. But if there was more than one pilot on board, he would have an opportunity to take a nap. And even while sleeping, and we tested this around a campfire one time, even while sleeping, if you said the tail number of the airplane, he was so laser focused on ATC, but specifically knowing when the tail number is spoken, he would wake up and almost inadvertently say like a radio call, like, you know, so if you told him like, "Hey, you know, such and such tail number changed to frequency 125.6 and what 125.6. And again, we tried it around the campfire and it works. So it was hilarious. So I don't know if that necessarily correlates to what you're saying, but you know, you can get yourself tuned to those specific things, whether it be a phrase or a call sign or even just ATC in general, understanding what your airplane sounds like, so that if there is something that's wrong, you may not know what it is, but you go, it's not supposed to sound like this.
Exactly.
And I've had that before. It has saved me on a couple occasions where you just feel off and you're like, I don't know why, but it's not right. And then you go, oh, it's because we're losing oil pressure. That's not good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So again, I'm not entirely certain if that correlates to what you're saying, but it makes sense to me.
Yeah, no, it does totally correlate, because if you think about it, now you know that stimulus of the odd sounding engine is going to your thalamus. It's sending alarm bells off to your brain before it's even gone to your cerebral cortex. And you can go, I think I'm hearing a problem. Our cerebral cortex, we think it's fast. It is not fast. This thalamic reflex of producing that sort of immediate physical alert response is so much faster. That's why if you put your hand on a hot stove, you pick your hand off quickly. You don't have to think, my hand is burning. Perhaps I should remove my hand. Removing hand in 3, 2, 1. It happens automatically. It's the same thing with hearing. So along with your point with this improving concentration and focus, I have that musical example. And then to your point, with my own aviation training, I found ATC so overwhelming because, well, the radio specifically overwhelming, especially on a summer day in New England when you're at like 3,500 and we're picking up every freaking happy-go-lucky flyer on a Saturday afternoon in the entire area. Oh my gosh, we're getting like 15 different airports and you're new and it's just all this noise. So what I did is I went home, I opened up liveatc.net on my computer, like 8 different channels, had them all going at once. And on my handheld radio, I'd intermittently have my husband from the next room give my call sign. So I would just be studying and I'd have to like have all that noise going on and be studying and then pick out my call sign. I'd just be like, hey, sweetie, for the next hour, intermittently, just give me a call. And I've missed quite a few of them, but it was training me again with this idea of training your concentration and focus. That was one thing I did that I found really, really helpful and got me over that hump of getting overwhelmed by the noise. One last little thing on improving concentration and focus. I know you use binaural beats.
I do.
There's actually evidence out there that those like really, really work. I will, in the show notes, throw in a thing from a recent episode with the Huberman Lab. It's Dr. Andrew Huberman. He's out at Stanford, I think. And he actually references binaural beats and talks about with specificity how they actually will work to help your concentration and focus for many of the reasons that we just talked about. So those are really great. I use something similar, not binaural beats, but another program similar when I'm studying. I find it very, very helpful and useful.
Yeah, I mean, they're not for everybody. And I know if for anybody who's listened to our debunking episode, the research that I could find sort of was inconclusive, and they were talking about the quality of, the speakers that you would be using or the intensity of the sound as to how effective it would be. I use just your standard like $10 earbuds, and I just kind of wedge them in and turn it up, and probably some of the things that we're telling you not to do here, but I swear it works.
Yeah. Well, and there actually is, like I said, we'll link in the show notes. We'll link to the Huberman Lab, and he gives some of the little bit of a deeper thing into specifically binaural beats and how they actually do produce certain states in the brain as evidenced by imaging. So there's some validity to it. Very briefly, I want to talk about this one. This is a short one, but I just want to talk about how to energize workouts. In an upcoming episode, we're going to have a fantastic aviator and personal trainer and a dietary expert on, and she's going to talk a lot about exercising and how beneficial it can be. And I'm actually going through one of her dumbbell protocols right now and loving it. And it got me thinking about how much I intrinsically use music to energize my workouts. Do you use music when you work out? You run, right?
I do, yeah.
Do you like to listen to music, or are you like, you just free like the wind in your hair?
No, I need music to push me forward.
This is so intuitive. Most people know it, but if you're picking a piece that's stimulative, again, the opposite of sedative, so 120 beats per minute or faster, energizing instrumentation, a lot of varied instrumentation, varied dynamics, that has an effect on your nervous system that can stimulate you to push past a sense of fatigue, a sense of drudgery. If you're doing something like running, which to me just sounds like, oh, why would I want to? The most I run is like in tennis. It's like a sprint, 5 steps forward and 5 steps back. And I'm like, I'm good for the year. That was my sprint. But it can really profoundly be very uplifting to a workout and can get you into that zone when you're working out without really needing caffeine or to feel different. Now that you know all the things that we've talked about today, you don't have to think differently in order to use music to help you feel differently. So I recommend, if you have a playlist that you always use, either adjust. One thing I've started doing though, just to keep it fresh, is before every workout, I create a new playlist. It does take a couple of minutes, but I'm a music nerd. But I have found that it's made my workouts full of a lot more energy because I get into a dull routine when I have like the same playlist all the time. And if I'm just mixing it up or going to the albums and picking like 10 new songs for that workout in the day, I really do find a profound uplift to my mood when I'm done. So go with stimulative music, change it frequently, and that will have nice biological effects. Okay. I have two more. This next one we touched on already, but I want to really go into protocol number 6, which is combating racing thoughts. This can be anyone at any time, really. And I actually have just one simple idea. I mean, I think most of us can relate to racing thoughts. But one simple idea that we already touched on is using silence. As a yoga instructor and as a musician, I teach a lot of musicians. And what I find for them is what is deeply restorative for them when they come in and they're racing and can't slow down and anxious and just on high alert is we start the class with music that's a little bit faster and movement that's faster. Then partway through the class, it's music that's a little bit slower and movement that's a little slower. At the end of class, guess what? We're at sedative music and slower movements. And at the very end of class is nothing but silence. And at the end of that silence, every student looks like they're in the bliss bubble, man. They're like, oh my gosh. But what we tend to do without that instruction is we go, I must meditate now and be silent. And we force ourselves to be like still and silent, and then we're pushing against it. So what I'm recommending is if you have racing thoughts, pick 2 or 3 pieces, one that's a little faster, maybe go for like a little jog, go for a run, do a workout, do something. And then shift that to like maybe you're just walking and something a little slower. Then shift that at the end. I had one student do this where you go sit under a tree at the very end of your run. You do your stretches there and you spend just 1 to 2 minutes in silence outdoors, just taking in the noise of the environment. And my students who have done that, these high achieving, high performing musicians, they're like, oh my God, I'm sleeping so much better at night. My workouts are so much better. I'm so much happier. I'm still doing my high intensity exercise, but I'm just pairing it with a little bit of silence towards the end that I've downshifted into. And that couple minutes of silence is profoundly restorative. If you're a person of faith, I recommend that you go to your place of worship and spend just a few moments there before or after the services, just enjoying the quiet. So my last little protocol here is talking about that work-life balance, which I hate that term. Like, it's so lame. It makes us feel like we should be in balance, but it's just finding ways to use music in a supportive way so that you're feeling like life is neither all work and little play. So many pilots are musicians. If you are a musician, practice, play. Just literally get out some music and play. It does not have to be a long practice session. It does not matter if you haven't played in forever. It doesn't matter if you think you're not good anymore. Just get out some music and play. 5 to 10 minutes of active music making can be so freaking awesome for your brain and your mental health. It's fantastic. If you are not a musician, simple things like going to hear people play music live is so uplifting and brings you together in community and puts life in this wonderful vessel where we're expressing emotion, we're with other people, we're having our brains organized and energized by the music, and it's all wrapped in this tidy package that has a beginning and a middle and an end. And our brain and our nervous system love that sense of safety. And in this world now where we don't have a lot of the underpinnings of spiritual life that we used to sort of organize our week, it's really nice to find ways that we can come together with other people for a shared purpose. And music and attending concerts can be a great way to experience that. We all know how awesome it feels to go to a really good concert, especially with loved ones. Be like, oh, that was so freaking awesome. Think of it as like a hobby that can enrich your life. And I think it can bring a lot of benefit that then when you go flying, you're a happier, healthier, more enthusiastic, more like brain powered kind of person. So that's what I got. Now, peanut gallery questions, comments, concerns. What are you thinking? I'm not going to give you homework.
I think we've kind of hit all the comments as we've gone. It is interesting to see how different people use music differently. And I joke about the death metal, but really it's my wife. When
Awesome.
I'll sit there and I'll try to like find something relaxing to listen to, and she'll just be antsy and I can't do this.
Yeah.
But then she'll sit down and try to get some work done or something like that. Next thing you know, you hear like Disturbed in the background, and it's just, screaming in her ears, and she's in her happy place.
I love it.
It's interesting how there is science behind the sound itself, but then personality can almost in some cases override the science, because it's still such a unique experience for everyone.
Yes.
Regardless of what your body wants or whatever, you can kind of personally say, no, this is what does it for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that that's interesting. So I think that that having the ability to target certain things to de-stress or downshift, as you call it, and prepare yourself for sleep, paired up with some of the other episodes we've already done about sleep or about de-stressing, it just kind of further goes to show that so much of this stuff is connected. And to truly be able to get that superpower of I'm going to sleep, or I have 10 hours from landing to takeoff that I have to somehow become a human being again. These are all things that are meant to help you. And so hopefully somebody out there, listeners out there, you find this useful and you find the connecting thread. And if you pull it, hopefully it works for you.
Yeah. And please let us know if you have other ways that you use music to enhance your flying life or just your general holistic well-being as a human being. Especially if you're a musician, I'd love to hear from you. I think there's a lot of correlation there. And in a future episode, we're going to be diving into vision. So we're kind of going in through the senses and talking about how we can use them as pilots to enhance our flying life. So I think that's a wrap for today. Please make sure you drop us a review. We'd love a 5-star review. We'd love an email from you. And you can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram for updates. I guess that's a wrap on this episode. What do you think? Anything else?
No, I just appreciate you. I know you put a bunch of work into getting this together. I learned a lot. I don't know anything about any of this. So I do think it's interesting because, like you said, so many pilots are musicians at one point in their life. I was too, but I just banged on a drum. That was all I did. So no, this was really good. And I intend to put some of this stuff into my own practice.
Awesome. Thanks everyone so much for listening. We can't wait to see you next time. But until then, fly smarter
and stress less.
Airbus Air 1 departure is Airbus 321. Traffic holding crossing runway 33 left 3 lane.